This is the hour, the Steven hour, and yes, we're back with a 007 movie review. It's been a while, and in today's movie review, well, Bond movie review, we'll be reviewing the 1999 Bond film, The World Is Not Enough, with Pierce Brosnan in his third film. Now, before we get into the cast and the plot, let's get a bit of background. Now, in 1997, they released Tomorrow Never Dies, which, of course, like all Bond films, are always big hits at the box office. However, critically, it was criticized for being too action-packed and not enough on story. So when it came to this film, they wanted to focus more on an actual story and have a bit more depth. Now, because of the fact it's more in-depth, we see this in two ways. First off, it's directed by Michael Apted, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, and he was more known for doing documentaries, and because of that, they hired him to direct. Now, he was not known for action movies. I think he may have done, two before this, so I guess maybe because this was so new, that's why he got on board. Also, what made it new for more depth is the title. Like, again, by the Pierce Brosnan era, all the Bond names they had to make up, really. However, the title GoldenEye and The World Is Not Enough actually do stem from mythology in the Bond universe and behind the scenes. GoldenEye was the summer retreat that Ian Fleming used to stay in, where he wrote all the Bond films, and The World Is Not Enough is the essentially Bond's family motto, and we were alluded to this on Her Majesty's Secret Service when that was said to be the family crest. With all this said, the filmmakers really wanted this third installment to really be a good one, and it's kind of anticipated when an actor does do their third Bond film, they give the best performances, and to many people it's one of the best films out there, like Goldfinger and The Spy Who Loved Me. Third Bond films in Sean Connery and Roger Moore's respected run are considered the best films ever made. So the question is, how good is The World Is Not Enough? And how do I feel about it when revisiting it? Well, before we get to that, let's hop straight into the cast. For the cast, we have Pierce Brosnan once again Sorry, I was about to sneeze there. Once again, Pierce Brosnan is returning to the role of James Bond in his third outing. Now, I'll be straight up. I feel that Pierce Brosnan gives his best performance in this one out of his entire run. This is his best performance in the role of James Bond. The main Bond girl this time around is Dr. Christmas Jones, portrayed by Denise Richards. Already, this Bond girl is often hated by the fan base, and she's arguably considered the worst Bond girl ever. I don't consider her the worst, we already know who that is, but I can't deny that she's just terrible, in my opinion, completely miscast. Here we have Sophia Marceau in the role of Electric King. I won't reveal her character through the movie, but if you've seen some of my top 10 videos, you could guess what her character will be. Here we have essentially one of the villains of the piece, Renard, portrayed by Robert Carlyle. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that last name right. Now I know this actor from a lot of things. He was in the Full Monty, but I will always remember him from his role as Rumpelstiltskin in Once Upon a Time. For me, that is just the film, that is the series that I will forever associate him with. He was great in that series as Rumpelstiltskin and Mr. Gold, respectively. We also here have Valentin Dmitry Sukovsky, portrayed by Robbie Coltrane. Now, this character appeared in GoldenEye, and I like that they brought him back. He was so fun, and it made sense to bring him back. He was fun. Also, this time around, we have Judy Dench still playing him, third time around, but she gets to play a little bit more in the story than what most, I guess, reoccurring MI6 staff usually do. So I'm really nice that they brought her to do this, to have more of a role in the story, which is really interesting when going forward. Rounding out the rest of the cast is, first off, this will be sadly the last time we will see Desmond Llewellyn in the role of Q. It's sad that this is his final role. He will be leaving. This will be his last film, and considering that, this film should be remembered, well, partly remembered for his last appearance. Here we also have John Cleese, a well-known comedian. I think he was from the Monty Python fame, plays essentially Q's assistant. Samantha Bond is back as Moneypenny, really great, as always. here we have Colin Samuel back as Charles Robertson, and we have Michael Kitchen, Kitchen as Bill Tanner. Great that they're bringing him back. But we also have other characters that will portray a bit or have a bit of a role in the story. These include David Calder as Sir Robert King. And he's arguably, his character is really what drives essentially the film with the story. And of course we have Saren Scott Thomas as Dr. Molly. She has another last name, but she is just another minor character that turned up just for this film. And here we have Goldie as Bullion, a minor character as well. Goldie, from what I find out, he's some kind of rapper, so that's what they brought him. This is really the cast, and just like I guess the cast's kind of small. I'm really getting only cast that really contribute to the story, or people I just find that should be noted. Overall, this cast is kind of weird in a way. And anyway, that's the cast. Let's get straight into the review. We begin the film with yet another James Bond gun barrel scene, and then we see Bond essentially go to a place, I believe, in Switzerland, where he sees where he's here to visit essentially a contact, or not contact so much, to essentially a Swiss banker to retrieve some money for Sir Robert King. And but while he's there, he's also trying to find out the death of a fellow 00 agent. And just as that's happening, he is essentially surrounded, and it's hinted he's going to be killed, only for Pierce Brosnan to really use one of his gadgets and really mops the floor with them. How he just looks, he looks so badass and also so authentic in that brutal scene. He then takes the Swiss banker at gunpoint and asks for a name, only to be killed by what turns out to be the so-called cigar girl, is what she's often referred to in the fan base, as she runs out. Hearing that the police are coming, he does this very funny, very inventive and a little bit funny jump. Not so funny as Roger Moore, but funny just because there's a little bit of a gag, and it's really a great scene. And as he's walking off, the police cars come by. Now, it should be noted that this is where the filmmakers planned to have the opening end there, but they needed the opening to be more, a bit more action-packed, more excitement. So for the first time in the series, this is one of the longest openings before we get to the proper opening credits. So as a result of that, Bond then ends up at HQ, MI6 headquarters in London, where he meets up with the usual Moneypenny scene. Both Samantha Bond and Pierce Brosnan are great in that scene, and then of course he goes to meet M, where M is with Sir Robert King, and it turns out that the two are best friends and go way back, almost like a friend of the family, or almost. And just as he's leaving to collect his money, Bond is curious about the whole thing. Why would someone want him out of that building alive? He's very concerned with the whole thing. But because of the money he's touched, for some reason it's acting different with the ice that he's put into his glass of drink. And he comes to the conclusion that has something to do with the money, and they have to stop King before something too late happens. And we get this really, really intense scene of him running towards the money, only resulting in an explosion happening, essentially killing King and pretty much almost sadly everyone in the room, and leaves this big hole in the wall which looks over the Thames. Now, from what I've been told behind the scene, the proper MI6 did not want this explosion to be done at the actual base, but apparently the powers that be, because apparently they got some kind of call from the actual royal family to do this, it happened anyway. So it's a nice little interesting fact there. Anyway, when Bond looks out the window, a machine gun is fired at him, and it's the cigar girl. Why she's there? Probably to make sure that if the bomb missed or something failed, she could kill King. That is my best guess. It's a bit illogical, but hey, you gotta suspend your disbelief to enjoy the film. With her getting away, Bond then runs into Q's lab and takes his experimental boat. It launches out of the building, and we get this awesome boat chase across the Thames. It is absolutely fun, and it's arguably one of the best, I should say, chase scenes in the series. And one of the unique, for the first time ever, Bond is really arguably chasing someone, because usually it's always the other way around, but when Bond is chasing someone, it's a little bit more interesting. And of course, he gets to use some of the gadgets. It's all fun until I think it goes to some kind of dome that was being built at real life at the time. And the cigar girl tries to escape by air balloon. Bond manages to get on, and the girl is constantly firing, and he wants a name. Eventually, the cigar girl points the gun, essentially these canisters that could possibly cause an explosion when fired, but he tells him that he can protect her, but she says not from him. She fires, and the gas starts leaking, and Bond, let go, rolls down the dome. The explosion happens within the air balloon, killing the cigar girl, and Bond manages to get to safety, but he's essentially injured his arm so bad it's essentially almost broken. So here Bond has actually got a proper physical injury, and it's really shocking. And then we go into the proper opening credits. This was the longest in the series, but I'm really glad that they went with it, as first off, you have to, and I personally felt it was a pretty good opening and one of the best in the series. We then get to the song, the title song, "The World Is Not Enough," written by David Arnold with Don Black and was performed by Garbage. I'm not a huge fan of this song. It's okay. I like some of the imagery which foreshadows some stuff in the film, but it's not one of my best favorites. It's honestly not. I don't know. Just not one of my favorites, I guess. Anyway, we then go to Scotland, where essentially a funeral is being held for Sir Robert King, where we get to see a lot of the MI6 regulars, and also we get acquainted to Electric King, Sir Robert's daughter, and Bond is a little bit intrigued by her, and then we go to an actual Scottish castle. Now, I like the scene taking place in Scotland. Throughout the backstory, Bond has always been of Scottish descent. And we get a little Easter egg in the background with a portrait of Bernard Lee, the guy who originally played him in essentially the early series. A nice little Easter egg for hardcore fans, and a sort of acknowledging the past, I guess, and what a great man Bernard Lee was to the M role. It's really great. Now what happened is, it turns out the explosion happened because of a lapel pin Robert had, and the money was filled with some kind of radiation, and when it came to contact, caused the explosion. As a result of that explosion killing, they realized it had to be someone close to Robert to do that, and you can see the M is furious that not only did they use MI6 to kill a great man, but you can also see deep down she's mad that her friend is dead. It's really interesting to see M in a position like this. I guess you can't see that they convey it so much in the film, but for me it was always obvious that she was wanting to get revenge on the person who did this to Robert, because how long they go back, how friends they were. It really adds so much interesting to her character. And when they go handing out assignments, Bond does not give one because of his arm. Until he's cleared by medical leave, he has to be medical leave before he can be a part of it. So there is the scene with this doctor where Bond does use a bit of his charm, in other words, shags her to get out of, to get a clean bill of health, to get out of a medical thing. And then we then see the scene where Bond visits the Q lab with yet another more Q gadgets getting, tested. Q's angry at Bond for ruining his boat. And we also get to see the newest Bond car. This kind of comes a little bit of out left field of, because Bond's not given an assignment yet, but still, it's just something to be noted. I also like the BMW this time around. I like how the silver it looks pretty cool. I will be honest, it looks far better than the blue one. It's essentially the same one but different color. But also we get acquainted to John Cleese's R, who essentially will be in the next film Q, essentially taking over the Q role, and he plays the character different to Desmond Llewellyn's, Instead, he plays the character more of his Monty Python or comedic chops, which I like. He gives the character his own here. Also here, we get to how Desmond Llewellyn's final scene. It's really sad considering it. All the bonds always change, but for the longest, and to be fair, some of the recurring MI6 staff have changed. Moneypenny, sometimes Bill Tanner, sometimes appears. Felix Leiter, jeez, how many Felix have we had over the series? But for the longest time, Q never changed. Now, people might have what they consider their favorite version of Q, but for many people, the best version, the iconic version, and arguably everyone's favorite version of Q will be Desmond Llewellyn's performance. Tragically, he did die in a car accident. I believe it was a few weeks either before or after this film's premiere, so keep that in mind, which is really sad when you do. But the fact is, his final scene is a real shame, and I personally felt he went out on a good note, what he did best. This was, for me, a perfect way to send off his character, and knowing that it's sad that he's gone really is. It's really sad. We then see Bond doing a little bit of investigative work that turns out that Electra King was involved in a kidnapping a while back. And he also finds out that the money that was used for that ransom is the same money that Robert King got that was in the explosion. Though granted, in different estimates, you get the idea. I also like how Bond is a little bit emotional here, drawn to Electra King because of her traumatic experience. He then goes to M and informs everything, and we get a bit about detail about her original kidnapping. As it turns out, that when she got kidnapped, Robert came to her and she tried to help out. And because of that, with all the logic, they come to the conclusion that the terrorist is back. The whole thing was a message. We then find out that the so-called terrorist was named real name Victor Zerkas, aka Renard the Anarchist, a KGB agent turned terrorist. And it turns out that he had a run-in with MI6. You see, when M was asked in on the Robert kidnapping, a 00 agent went up against Renard, and as a result, but couldn't kill him, but instead placed a bullet in his head. Now the bullet is slowly making its way, gradually making way through his system, making him immune to pain, but eventually the bullet will kill him. So this is a villain that has a ticking clock in his head. And granted, maybe, well, how does bullet prevent him from feeling pain? For me, it's not the weirdest thing I've ever heard. I mean, come on, we have several villains in the series where they're immune to pain, but this makes the character a little bit more compelling. And already we know this character is going to be a big threat throughout the film. Also, it's clear to everyone that Renard has clearly killed everyone involved in that kidnapping. He's humiliated MI6, he's killed Robert, but there's one person he still hasn't touched, Electra. Realizing that could be possibly his next target, Bond is put on the mission after being cleared bill of health. I love that scene between the Doctor and Moneypenny, it's fun. And basically, M tells him to be on the mission to essentially look after Electra to make sure nothing happens. And also to tell her to essentially don't shag her, despite his reputation. We then see Bond fly to Azkaban, where Electra King is overseeing the construction of an oil pipeline. During a tour, and we get this acquaintance between Bond and Electra, they are on heavy, shaky terms. And I do like how we get a little nod or a little Easter egg when she says, "Have you ever loved anyone?" and he freezes before he moves on the conversation. I think that's a little hint to Tracy, or maybe even other Bond girls that he's genuinely loved over the years. But I like to consider that, and I find that really interesting that they would do that. And it's clearly hinting these two's characters. I really like with what they're going with. Despite their shaky turns, Bond still plans to be with Electra to oversee and make sure nothing happens to her. Next thing you know, they go up into these snowy mountains to make sure the pipeline is done on time, where Bond and Electra are then attacked by a squad of armed paraglider equipped snowmobiles. It's pretty. I love the concept. We're seeing something new. What doesn't work for me is it's turned into something we've seen before. Bond and her being chased by these armed thugs. This reminds me so much of On Her Majesty's, which is why I kind of don't mind this scene. But also so many scenes where Bond is being chased and he's skiing away. Though Bond does take him out and uses one of his gadgets to save him and Elektra from being killed, and the two begin to really bond after this. I really like that scene for what it was, and I really think that these two, that Pierce and Sophia Marceau, have for me really some great chemistry here. It's absolutely astounding. We then go to her estate where he has to, and the two begin to more bond, but he's pulling himself away, not want to get too emotionally involved with her. Bond then later goes to a casino, and I like this scene where he goes in, he's wearing these glasses to sort of infrared to see people, you know, with weapons on, like X-ray. But every time I see that, I'm kind of a little bit reminded of the Arkham games where, you know, Batman had that detective vision. It reminds me a little bit. After interrogating one of the thugs and, you know, being led to the main office room by Bullion, we find out that the guy running the casino is Valentin Sukovsky, who is now less gangster, more businessman now. And it turns out that Bond and him essentially go and are on really good terms now. In fact, they're more friends than anything else, despite what he did to him in the past. I like that Valentin Sukovsky is brought back, and Robert Coltrane is absolutely great in this role, in this scene. He's fantastic. We then find out, he then reveals here the events of the attack by the men in the snow, and Renard's behind this, but essentially we just give him more info with what's happened previously in the film, how people are trying to shut down Elektra's pipeline, as there are many competitors, and that's kind of thing. I wish there would be something more, but it's good to have Robbie Coltrane. But we then find out that Elektra is in the casino along with along with her bodyguard, and she is also trying to find the person that tried to kill her. Bond tells her to go, but then we see Elektra and Valentin Sukovsky, you know, have this card game. And I will admit, this card game does play a little bit in the story, though we're not supposed to think about it now. Eventually, the card scene ends with essentially Elektra losing $1 million to Sukovsky. They leave, and Bond then says the line, "This is a scene I can't afford to play." As they leave, he then asks where his true chief, like his chief of security, which we have seen a few scenes in the film by this point, both at Elektra's home and going to the construction site where he is. She says he's taken the day off, and then we see him and a scientist meet up in what essentially is the devil's breast, some kind of religious site. And here Renard makes his appearance. For me, and first off, I like this scene. How he just comes in, he holds the rock, it doesn't faze him, he doesn't act to pain. And he is mad at that Bond is not dead. Bond is not dead, despite the Doctor providing with all this, with this equipment. And even though he's mad, he then turns to the Doctor and asks the event for their next plan. But he says everything should be scrapped, as the Powerhawks are meant to be returned, and people will soon be asking questions. At first, Renard seems to be on his side of not being punished, but then he signals his men to kill the Doctor, and tells the essentially chief of security to take his place on the mission and be on time. Just as he and the thug leave, we then go back to Elektra's place, where Bond and her essentially make out. Though there isn't supposed to be a deleted scene explaining this, I always felt that it came out of nowhere. But anyway, it is what it is. Then Bond ends up leaving to follow the chief of security, where he ends up killing him and taking his place on this mission. We get a bit of funny moments, and when he takes his place, the guy had this ID, and he replaced it with his photo. Now, his photo for the ID came from a tag called Universal Exports, a little bit of hints to the series where Bond always was in the Universal Export thing. I really found that interesting, to be all quite honest. Now they end up taking this plane that goes to a Russian ICBM base in Kazakhstan, and here Bond poses as this Russian nuclear scientist. And whilst there, he meets the real Bond girl of the film, an American nuclear physicist named Dr. Christmas Jones, portrayed by Denise Richards. Everyone hates this character. I don't think the character is bad per se, other than maybe a lazy name. The problem is the actress. You have a person who doesn't, in my opinion, doesn't look like an actual scientist, and doesn't dress like an actual scientist. She essentially dresses like this girl in her early 20s still thinks she's a teenager. I mean, come on, look at this image that you see of her is what she wears in the early bit of the film, in this scene. No way anyone would dress like that. And what even worse, she doesn't even act like she is a scientist, or even talk like she would be a scientist. I'm not being sexist or anything, but when you have, for me, actresses that don't scream independent or strong independent women, instead you have, you know, bimbos who are trying to essentially still be younger than who they are, that just ruins characters, and for me, personally, ruins images of that. I'm not being sexist here, and I'm not being against the actress. I'm sure she could do great roles, but I just personally felt that this role just wasn't for her. Maybe not yet in her career, but hey, that's just me. Whilst there at the essentially site, Bond goes underground, where he comes face to face with Renard and his men, essentially taking these like, I guess, a nuclear bomb, but also taking out a GPS locator card out of the nuclear bomb. But eventually, Dr. Jones manages to find out Bond is a fake, and the whole military, at least a small squad, comes down there, along with the head of the base, come down there to shut the whole thing down, considering too many faces. But Renard and his men end up opening fire. Now, I'm skipping a little bit here to what happens when Bond goes down, that he literally has Renard at gunpoint and plans to kill him in cold blood. And another thing that kind of bugs me, now Renard's supposed to feel no pain, but when he gets hit, he kind of feels or goes to the ground. I can understand maybe a bit of blood or a scar, but he's not supposed to feel pain. But I also see how he looks so shocked that he's feeling it. So I think what is, by this point, as the film goes on, he's slowly starting to feel pain, but it comes out of nowhere sometimes. He doesn't know what's causing it. Anyway, then we get that scene where the squad comes down. Renard ends up opening a gunfight. Bond manages to save Dr. Christmas Jones, and we get this, for me, okay gunplay. It's fun, not groundbreaking, but fun, and I can enjoy it. Renard does end up escaping the facility along with the nuclear bomb with only a small crew of his men. The ones in the underground got killed. But whilst that's happening, Bond is locked within the downstairs thing, and he and Christmas Jones quickly get out as Renard has set up an explosives to kill them. And there's this fun scene when she asks for his real name, when he reveals to her that he's a spy. He get this scene where he reveals his name, Bond, James Bond. How the whole thing is done is so cool. A little bit cheesy, but cool. The two manage to get out just in time, but they can't locate them because Bond reveals the located chip that they took out that he now has in his possession. We then get a call. We then cut to trying to track where Renard is. But Electra King ends up calling and telling that Bond is left, and she is essentially scared, needs help, and she, without any hesitation, immediately comes out. We then see Bond go to her place, where he ends up knocking out a guard, one of her guards, and they have this really intense conversation where he believes that she is in league with Renard because of one line he said. There's no point living if you can't feel alive. That is the same line she used later in the film. Earlier in the film, I should say. And at first, Electra's disgusted and says, why? Because of the arm? Because he revealed in the conversation about the shoulder with Renard. He says, anyone could have seen that. You were at the funeral, remember? Anyone could have seen that. And he kind of feels a little bit guilty for coming out with this. Just as that, a little bit, he's starting to think that he may be wrong. Eventually, Electra King gets a call saying how there was essentially a mass massacre at this site, and and everyone comes out. Bond, her, M, and Charles, everyone's out to see the site, but they find that something is going wrong in this Inspector rig terminal thing, as it's not responding, and everyone's concerned. Also, Dr. Jones is there. Why do they have to have her? Also, before this scene happened, Bond does confide in M that she may be guilty. M doesn't fully believe it, even though Bond has soundable evidence which could prove it, including when he hands her a locator card as proof of the theft and sound reasoning. But M doesn't fully believe him. Anyway, we get back to that rig thing with the whole thing in the tunnel, and as a result, Bond and Jones enter the pipeline to deactivate this bomb within it, as that's the conclusion everyone's come up to. Now, as we're doing this, they are just about to deactivate it, but decide not to, and it explodes, and everyone believes Bond and Jones are dead. And M is kind of heartbroken, maybe because he always viewed not just Bond as the best, but kind of as a son figure. Just as that's happening, we go back to the command station center, where Electra tries to comfort M, but also gives her a gift. And when she opens, it's a lapel pin, the same one that Richard used to explode the money. And her men end up killing everyone within the control center. It is then revealed that this is for revenge. Originally, the blast was supposed to kill Richard and M, because she is mad at M for using her as bait to catch Renard, which was M's idea. But then we realize with Bond trying to do this, she could play the events to get M, and as a result, her men end up kidnapping M. So M is actually playing a bit of a role in the story. I love that. We then go back, of course, finding out Bond and her survived the explosion, and reveals that Electra is behind everything. He gets in contact with Charles and says about how M's been kidnapped and everyone dead. Bond then realizes that they need to find where Electra is, and Koskov may just have the answer. We then see the scene where essentially Renard and Electra are in Turkey, and essentially reunite, and it's revealed that they are actually lovers / partners in crime, and the two planning a big scheme together, with Renard as really the muscle. So instead of being the main villain that we're led to believe of Renard, he turns out to be the sort of henchman, and Electra is the main villain. So for the first time ever in the series, we have a female lead villain. Usually they play either second fiddle. So this is really interesting they're going with that. Bond ends up going to Zukovsky at his caviar factory, and it also turns out that his assistant, Bullion, is actually in leave with Electra, and notifies of Electra that Bond is alive, and they send helicopters to the caviar factory. We get this really awkward fight scene, or action-packed scene. It's okay, but it's kind of awkward. Bond ends up saving Koskov and reveals that he made an arrangement with Electra, courtesy of what happened at the casino. The $1 million was a payoff for an exchange to use a submarine which was operated by Koskovsky's nephew, Nikolai. The group then goes to Istanbul. Well, we've seen that before. That was in From Russia with Love. And here we find some old, essentially underground organization that Koskov happens to have ties to. And there they try to figure out, what is going on and where M is. But they manage to find out something. Have a nuclear reactor, and it turns out that that essentially Koskov's nephew is in a division where the submarine involves nuclear. And essentially, because they plan to use that submarine to create a nuclear reactor that results in a nuclear reactor meltdown that would destroy Istanbul and sabotaging the Russians' oil pipeline. And as a result, Electra's pipeline will plan to go around Istanbul, dramatically increasing the value of her own oil, essentially wiping out one of the major competition. But however, we then come back to M being locked up, and she still has the card Bond gave her. She gets her hand on some kind of clock that was essentially used to taunt her about when the seconds are up, her time is up, and she uses it to send a homing beacon, which gets everyone's attention. And just as they try to figure out the location, Bullion, Kosko's henchman, leaves and essentially leaves a bomb that explodes. Now, the bomb knocks out Zhukovsky, but when Bond and Jones try to capture Bullion, she is instead captured by Electra's henchmen. They then take Bond and Jones to a tower, well, the base, I should say, and Jones is taken down to the submarine with Renard. It is revealed by this point that Renard and his men now have control of the submarine. They've killed all the crew, and Renard and his crew plan to get on the submarine. And essentially the two say goodbye one last time, where Renard is really sad that this will be the last time he'll see her. And I think that Electra doesn't really care for him, not really, but is really using him for her own ends. I guess the capture really changed her, and she twisted Renard in a way. As that's happening, Bond is being tied up in this chair, which is real torture. Both Pierce Brosnan and Sophia play really well here. It's a really tense scene. The two really play off each other, and it's just a really great scene. It's so great. And just when you think Bond's numbers up, as no one's left, Zhukovsky and what's little of his men turn up at the tower and end up in a gunfight, killing essentially a lot of Electra's men and also Bullion for selling Zhukovsky out. As Zhukovsky gets into the essentially room where Electra is, he is shot by Electra, and it looks like he's died. He then quickly gets up and aims his cane at Electra. Turns out that this cane actually conceals a gun. But he turns to Bond, and it looks like he tried to kill him. But what he really did was loosen one of these things that was tying Bond down, and he dies. I like that little smirk he gives to Bond as he dies. And Coltrane, marvelous in that moment. Just as Electra feels like she has won, Bond quickly frees himself and tries to subdue her. She runs off, and Bond kills her main, arguably bodyguard / enforcer of the entire film and chases her up the stairs. As Electra is taunting him, he will not kill her in cold blood. Just as they get to the top, essentially her room, he holds her at gunpoint and orders her to call Renard off. And he is genuinely, and Pierce Brosnan is genuinely good in this scene. And Electra, geez, Bond and Electra in this scene are absolutely electrifying. The two actors are doing it well, as she is still taunting Bond will not kill her in cold blood. And you can see there's a little bit of hesitant there. But when she doesn't go through, Bond straight up shoots her in cold blood. And it's just as that scene, M, who is freed, looks on in shock, and you could see that Bond is almost remorseful and tries to convince himself that he did the right thing. But of course, Renard's still out there, so what he ends up doing is going to the balcony and jumps into the sea and essentially gets his way into the submarine and frees Jones. They then cause a distraction on the submarine in the control room, I guess what it is, and Renard ends up his way into the reactor room where he plans to put this rod in to cause the meltdown. Bond makes his way there, though trickily, I will admit, and the fight scene ends up. It's brutal, it's fist fight. Renard's no pain gimmick, I think, is completely gone by now. And a really great scene is when Bond reveals to him of Electra's dead scene. And he goes ballistic. I can genuinely see how he genuinely loved her. Even though it was questioned whether she loved him is up to debate. Realizing that there's nothing left to live for, he will get his revenge by not only killing Bond, but causing this massive destruction, no matter what. But Bond manages, with some trickery at the last minute, to cause the rod to instead go in, shoot straight out into his chest. Brutal. And Bond's final line to him was, "She's waiting for you." And he dies. Renard's death is... The villain deaths with Renard and Elektra are completely brutal. I love it. But they realize with the eruptor going, the submarine will explode, but it will not cause any nuclear meltdown. They quickly manages to get out just in time with the submarine underwater before it explodes. Both Bond and Jones have essentially saved the day. We then see that the two are in Turkey, essentially, doing what Bond usually does. Gets the girl at the end of the film, and everyone is shocked when they see this. I don't know why. Come on, they would have known this by now. We end the film with saying Bond will be back for the next film. The World Is Not Enough, for me, is a guilty pleasure Bond film. It's often regarded as maybe one of the... It's either one of the weakest or an average film. For me, it's always been one of my personal favorites. Personally, because there's such a lot of good ideas going on. Bond getting physically injured and getting emotionally invested in a woman who turns out to be the main villain. They could have gone, and these are plot points that have never been done in the series before. They could have gone all through. Renard is such an interesting villain who turns out to really be the henchman. I really like this. The opening scene is great. I think it would have made this film better if they focused on those points and really went all for it. The action scenes that came after would have been, I think, more stuff we've never seen before and something we've never had before. Also, I think this film does do is first the BMW actually does have gadgets that are used. It's used in the helicopter scene when they're attacking the caviar factory. And Bond does end up using some gadgets. But of course it quickly gets destroyed and he does say a line, Q is not gonna like this. Hey, at least it's better than what we got for the first BMW when it didn't have any gadgets used at all. Pierce Brosnan, for me, brings his best performance in this role. For me, the fact that this film wanted to focus more on depth and character development, I personally felt they nailed it in every aspect. Are there any bad things about this? Well, kind of. First off, other than Denise Richards' Bond Girl not being one of my favorites, and I've already said why I'm not a huge fan, is that enough? Second, first off, Bond is told to guard Elektra, but at some points in the film he ends up leaving her to do investigation work. That's the thing. Another thing is, how did the two end up hooking up? There should have been a scene where it was explained a bit more, and there is a deleted scene. I wish that either that was left in the film, or they could have done something to make it believable. Also, however, I want to also point out something I really like. For the first time in the series, they have M play more of a role. Rather than being a character with that really does exposition dump, she's more invested in the story. This will not be the first time Judy Dench's M would do this. She would do this later in Skyfall, which will be a film we'll be reviewing, no doubt, next up in the series lineup. Overall, for me, this is a guilty pleasure Bond film. Maybe not one of the greatest in the series, but I've always liked it. It's a personal favourite. I'm not sure if it's in top 10, I think it's somewhere around there, but I've always liked this film. I've always did. It's one of my favourites. The World Is Not Enough for me is a film that really had so many good points going for it. It should be regarded for me as a really unique film, and even though it's maybe not up there with films like The Spy Who Loved Me and Goldfinger, where the third Bond film of each actor's tenure is the best, I like to consider that despite that, it is still a good film overall. And there we have it. That was The World Is Not Enough. That was released in 1999. Like all films, it did huge at the box office, but like Tomorrow Never Dies, it was mixed, though not really hated. And most of the complaints for this film went to Dr. Christmas Jones's character by Denise Richards. Now, I really felt they went in a good step for the direction they wanted with this film. I really wish they could have focused on that. Instead, they didn't. So join us next time when we review 2002's Die Another Day. Can't wait to do that one. So until next time, this has been The Hour, the Steven Hour, and so long for now.